found myself just sitting at my desk at times and going, he's on our team.
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Go to Bowl fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, we've arrived. We've arrived to the infamous intermission in the offseason. OTAs are over, rookie minicamp's over, mandatory minicamp is over. Now plays the waiting game between now and Chargers training camp in late July. However, the Chargers were kind enough to drop us a plethora of information regarding their success and their plans and their impressions of the offseason so far. And rather than try and digest everything in one video, I was getting ready to, by the way, we're going to break it up into a couple of different slices, okay? And the first slice I want to break up is in regards of the Chargers coaching, all right? We've been talking a lot about OTAs and minicamp and getting excited about the players and the individual, risers and fallers and what's going to happen with the depth chart, yada, yada, yada. But I think the most important narrative of the offseason, the most important storyline, the most important development of the Chargers the last decade is the Chargers coaching situation right now. This video titled, what? Chargers Coaching Uprising. Coaching Uprising, right? It's a very big deal as to what the Chargers are doing in creating something new and fresh in the Jim Harbaugh era. And they had a chance to come out and talk to the media and talk to the fans about their impressions of OTAs and minicamp and all the offseason programs so far, how they think it's going and how they're building the team. What I wanted to do is give a more detailed look into, I guess, the minds of the coaches, what they're building and the progression or the progress that they're making right now. It is very important. It is very interesting, and ultimately, it's very exciting for us as Chargers fans to see this being built before our very eyes. We've talked a lot about the culture. We've talked a lot about the coaching, but I think tying everything up in a nice, neat bow and getting all these coaches' impressions of the offseason so far should really help us get a big picture look at what to expect going into training camp. Before we do kick things off, guys, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $250. You golf enthusiasts, definitely take advantage of this special for Scotty Scheffler this weekend. Before we do kick off, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, 1 minute of time you guys take, that the like, sub, bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this, baby. Lights, camera, action. A Chargers coaching uprising, baby. Time to talk about Jim Harbaugh and his staff and what they're creating here in the first offseason under his new regime, what the team is looking like, who's on the ups, who's on the downs, what's being worked on behind the scenes. Lots to uncover here, man. I would say a majority of this content, at least, my interpretation and speculation of what we're witnessing and talking about today, comes off of a lot of the interviews I heard from Jim Harbaugh, from Jesse Minter, and from Greg Roman specifically. Some other guys we're going to talk about as well and their impact, like, Ben Herbert, Navarro Bowman, Nick Hardwick. But more specifically, I want to focus on the big three, right? Starting with our fearless leader, Jim Harbaugh, who is quickly becoming the face of this franchise. It's kind of crazy. We talked about this already. I'm not going to ramble on too long, but it's nuts. It's nuts to me as a Chargers fan to think of the stage that I'm in right now, man. It has been a bumpy ride, to say the least, over the last, 5-6 seasons. From losing, Phillip Rivers to gaining, Justin Herbert, through all of the ups and downs of the coaching. Finally, it feels like we're in this new and exciting space that carries so much potential that I'm of the opinion I want to sit back and wait and see and just witness and appreciate what Jim Harbaugh is creating. But it also brings with it a new life of optimism. Almost like, it feels like, the only way I can describe it is like a secret optimism, right? Like I'm so pumped and I'm so excited. I'm so bewildered and beside myself every morning I wake up to realize that Jim Harbaugh is leading this team, but I'm also just so overwhelmed with hope right? And I got to imagine if I was a fan of feeling something like this, the players are sure feeling something similar, right? The first thing I wanted to cover is some of the stuff that Coach talked about in his recent pressers. He did a couple of them in regards or in and around mandatory minicamp. Of course, they're getting a lot of time with the media in those days. And us as Chargers fans and spectators of the sport, we gobble up everything that we can. And in these interviews, we did learn a lot about how they're managing the team, how they're building up the roster, and how they're building up the players. More specifically, that's, again, before we even dive into the details, that's probably one of the biggest things I took away, not just from Jim Harbaugh, but from his supporting staff. It feels like there's a huge emphasis on building the individual, right? A huge emphasis on building up your squad, getting the best possible version of every one of these players out on the field, whether they be a superstar like Justin Herbert or a backup running back like Isaiah Spiller. Everybody's getting the same treatment. Let's get the best version possible out of these guys, roll out into the field and find success. And it's a really new, fresh, and exciting way to approach a team build, a culture build that I appreciate with Coach Harbaugh and what he's doing here. Now, the first thing that he mentioned that he was satisfied with was the attendance and effort from the entire team. All right, so OTAs, of course, being, not mandatory, those are optional. The Chargers saw a majority of the team show up for that. And then, of course, minicamp rolls around. This is mandatory. The Chargers did get 100% attendance. I will tell you guys that I don't know how uncommon it is for a team to not have 100% attendance, but I've heard that it can be significant. It just means that everybody's on the same page. Everybody is in the same mindset, in the same commitment, and it really does feel like it translates to a level of respect for who's running the show, right? Jim Harbaugh, this is a guy that everybody knows, everybody recognizes, the man fresh off the natty, right? Like, everybody on this team recognizes how special an opportunity that we have in bringing Jim Harbaugh in as a head coach. And I think specifically Joey Bosa, we're not going to get into the details of that because that's a video for another day, but Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, these guys describe the opportunity to come back to the Chargers as exciting because of what is being built here, a winning team behind Jim Harbaugh, so much so that those guys were willing to move around their contracts to stick around and make it happen. Very significant. So that's what I'll say in terms of the attendance and the effort from the team that Coach is excited about. He also had a huge emphasis on attention to detail. Wow, this is something I'm not just hearing from Coach, but you're hearing from everybody around him, right? It almost feels like he's slapping you on the forehead, right, with the sticker that says detail, right? Attention to detail. Pay attention to detail. If everyone's wearing it on their forehead, then no one can avoid reading it at all times. Attention to detail is hugely emphasized throughout the culture of this team. And a couple of things that he points out in that detail is taking care of your body and tackling personal challenges, which is, was it clear eyes, full heart can't lose, something like that? Well, what about, a heart that's distracted or a person or a mind that's distracted? Being able to emphasize taking care of your life. You know what I mean? It's going to help you go out into the field more confident and more clear and level-headed. I know you guys go out there with your personal goals every single day, every single week, and sometimes it's hard to accomplish these things when you got something nagging at you, right? You got something you should have said to your wife, or you got something that you should have done with your kids, or an event that you should have, attended. All of these things can be a distraction. And for Jim Harbaugh, it feels like tackling these personal challenges is just as important as what you do on the field, taking care of your family, taking care of your body, right? These are things that I don't know if I've heard as a Chargers fan being emphasized as an important way to win football games. And it's something that is different that, catches me off guard. I'm sure it catches the players off guard, but it's something I have to imagine he's taken with him everywhere he goes. These unorthodox methods of coaching has found success everywhere. And it's kind of cool to start seeing the details of these. He emphasizes, again, time with family, personal health. These are big priorities, okay? Attention to detail also stems that they're asking him, where did this ideology come from, right? Why do you as a coach, push so hard all these little things that ultimately to a lot of teams don't matter? Who cares if your locker's a little messy, right? Who cares if your shirt's not tucked in? Who cares if there's music on at practice? That's not the way Jim Harbaugh runs this ship. Every little thing matters. The team, the players have started emphasizing this as well. Like, wow, when you start paying attention to the little things, it makes the big things that much easier and clearer to understand and to commit to, right? And he says that this attention to detail stems from what I'll call maybe his trinity, right? Family, religion, football. It seems to be something that he hits on a lot. He's always looking for people, smarter than him. He's always going out there and looking for things that I have to, guess and assume, and maybe even from some of my, exposure to religion. stems from discipline. He said that the word discipline comes from the word disciple, and all these different things that he's taking from his life experience, from every angle of what makes him Jim Harbaugh, and funneling it into his team, which is fantastic. And not everybody has to be religious, not everybody has to be a huge football guy, but these ideals I think are very healthy in everybody's life, and to see them pushed onto the team and instilled into this culture is very healthy in my opinion. And one thing I kind of skimmed over is, he's always looking for people smarter than him. I have to imagine that's something that he was taught. Surround yourself with individuals that are going to challenge you, that are going to raise you up, and that are going to ultimately create a more healthy environment. That's something that, okay, again, not to blow steam up my own butt, but that's a philosophy that I live by. I try to be around people that I respect and consider smarter than I am, because if they're around, then I think my chances at making it whatever I'm trying to do are going to be that much better, because I got these strong, smart, intelligent people supporting me, as I'm hoping to support them, right? And again, it creates this awesome atmosphere in which Jim Harbaugh feels like he's creating a huge change in culture, while also surrounding himself with people he can handle, a lot of the X's and O's work. Jesse Minter, Greg Roman, he thinks very highly of these guys. Every single coach on his staff, he thinks very highly of these guys. It feels very, well-oiled. The whole thing feels very well-oiled. Go ahead and move on to the next point here. He points to his players as people to emulate the best guys on the roster. So what I mean by that is that he talked about when he wants to create a team that's the best version of themselves, he's singling out some of the guys that he recognizes as some of the best, right? And in that, he pointed out Derwin James and Justin Herbert. It was really funny for me to hear that, because he was like, hey man, from the smallest details, right? He's a detail guy. From the smallest details, players coming up asking him, do I wear the hoodie? Do I do my hair a certain way? Do I have a certain swag? He's like, if Derwin's doing it, do it. You know what I mean? Like, this is the guy. This right now is the image of success. And if we can all be a little bit more like Derwin, then the better version of ourselves will emerge. And Derwin has been embracing this for a long time now, but particularly this season as, this leadership role. It really feels like we have, our general, and then we got our captains out on the field, like, Derwin James and Justin Herbert on offense and defense. This is a very, I think, good way to keep, I'm not going to say ranks, because it feels like he really views everybody on the same, level in terms of respect, but it really helps, spread the message that they're trying to spread throughout that kind of system. Justin Herbert being one of the biggest reasons that we know Jim Harbaugh wanted to come to the Chargers. He has not been shy to vocalize his love and his admiration for number 10 out there either, man. This has been cool. Honestly, to watch this chemistry become built, to see the different version of Justin Herbert emerge in the past couple. I don't know. Okay, again, we're not focusing in on these other guys that had awesome interviews in the last 24 hours, but Justin Herbert had an awesome presser. Okay, and Khalil Mack had an awesome presser. All these guys that historically maybe a little quieter, and Bosa maybe a little quieter, maybe a little more to themselves. These guys are alive. Right, they're out there. They're very comfortable in front of the camera for whatever that's worth, but their personalities are shining through. They're very vocal, and they're very confident, and they're very happy to speak and joke and make fun, and not fun in light of the situation, but just have a good experience going through all this growth. And it's been awesome to watch this. Jim Harbaugh has the same admiration and enthusiasm in talking about his players, doing in specific, Justin Herbert. He's continued to praise him, his work ethic, and it really feels like I said, with the way these guys are acting, the way these guys are stepping up to the plate as leaders, he's shaping these guys into leaders. He's shaping these dudes into the ultimate version of a football player that he wants his team to emulate, and it's working. It's working. It's hard to see because everything's happening in slow motion, right? But when you take a step back and you see everything working a little bit more smooth, like it really does feel like the contrast between Herbert last season, which was, Emo McGuire, black suited Spider-Man, to what we're seeing now. Like, it's a much happier, pep in the step kind of dude. Like, it feels like that confidence, it stems from Coach Harbaugh. I don't know. I appreciate stuff like that so much. And that's translating to stuff on the field too. Herbert had an awesome, last day at minicamp. He went nuclear. I think he went for like 5 touchdowns. Harbaugh continued to emphasize his physical abilities, all the perfect, small details in his game. These guys were meant to play together, to work together in the NFL. It's going to be an awesome duo. Like, honestly, guys, it's hard for me to properly describe my optimism for what the future holds, but you see these big quarterbacks in the league, and behind them oftentimes are these legendary coaches, right? The Tom Brady's and the Bill Belichick's, the Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid's. Like, this is a thing. This could definitely be the next thing to emulate that. The Justin Herberts and the Jim Harbaughs, of course, the John and the Lamar Jacksons too. Like, this is awesome. This is great to see unfolding in front of us. Really cool stuff. One huge thing that he did emphasize is how happy he is with the offensive line. I'm sure he is, dude. One of the biggest things that goes underappreciated from football fans, myself included. You guys think I'm going out there in Madden Ultimate Team and buying up the best offensive lineman I can find? No, I'm not. I'm focused on those receivers. I'm focused on those corners and skill position guys. Jim Harbaugh, I knew coming into this team, was going to bring a different emphasis in terms of building a team from different positions, and offensive line being the biggest one. This is the offensive line whisper. This is one of my favorite photos that I dug through the Chargers photo archives to show you guys today, because it emulates so much what this team is about to become, right? The attention to detail, the attention to different positions, how he wants to build from the trenches out. Like, it feels so authentic to what has brought him success everywhere he's gone. And Harbaugh has described it as a position group that he's very, very happy with. In terms of the defensive line, which is something that the Chargers I still think they need to do some work on, he said he was worried about the defensive line when he showed up, but he said it's turned out to be a strength, and he's very excited to see Puna and Tito and Morgan Fox. He said that he's surprisingly very optimistic and excited to see the defensive line get to work, right? Very cool thing. Oh, one small note that I forgot to mention in the details thing, how he's so into all the details and stuff with his quarterbacks and all this stuff. One thing that Khalil Mack mentioned that we'll mention in his individual video is how Jim Harbaugh is making them wear game jerseys rather than practice jerseys, because there is a difference. That is the level of detail that we're seeing from Jim Harbaugh. There is a difference. I don't know, you guys out there that are super fans, that I have a couple in my closet too, of, you know, the standard jersey that you buy on the website, and then like a game jersey. The game jersey, it has this mesh in the middle, right, that kind of squeezes your torso, makes it a little bit tough to breathe. That's what Khalil Mack was talking about, especially if you got pads on and stuff on top of it, right? That's pretty intense to think that Jim Harbaugh went through the lengths to emulate what they would experience, even down to the jerseys that they wear on some days. They prepare them for game day. Those are the little minute details that we're talking about. Kind of cool. Lastly, with Coach, with Harbaugh, right? Is this the last thing? His expectations are very high. He's eager to compete. That's something that we saw when they went and did that golfing tournament a couple of days ago. He mentioned how they're squeezing every ounce of work in the time allotted by the NFL. Like, they are taking everything down to the last second if they have to, right? Because you only have a certain amount of time that you're allowed to take your players out there. It's almost like working with a union, right? Like, you got these times and regulations that you have to abide by. Coach is squeezing every ounce that he can out of the team to get them ready for training camp. And one cool thing that I like that he does too, which ended up, he said, turning out to be a fantastic, strategy for him, was letting his players run parts of the practice. Right? He said that he would end practice early and says, hand it over to the guys, see what they do. Lean back and see what they do. And he says, crazily enough, they go harder, they go crazier. And that is such a cool way to lead, in my opinion. It's motivation to motivate, right? By putting that trust in your players and trusting that they are motivated enough to do that, it creates even more motivation in them to perform and to go that extra mile. Very cool. Team and culture building, it's been blatantly obvious. That's the huge forte and strength of Jim Harbaugh. It's something that I'm watching on Ted Lasso, right? You're wondering what he does sometimes, and he's just the dude that is the glue of the entire team, right? He builds that culture, brings in guys that are smarter than him. Everything kind of emulates what I'm seeing with Coach Harbaugh. It's fantastic. And one thing that he did let slip, which I think is very admirable. This is not something I'd be able to do. Jim, in bed by 9 p.m., back to work at 4 a.m. every day. That's great. Some guys are like that. Some dudes are like that, especially when it comes to the gym. I'm not like that. I have to admire it. And one last thing that he did mention, because people are going to be asking about, and I've been getting a lot of questions in the comments about it, what's going on with Gus Edwards. The last thing that I'll mention that Coach did mention was that he's very happy with Gus Edwards. He's been working to the side, though, because he is injured. But he does say he's ascending. I'm getting a different sense from that. But we'll go over that later with the running backs video. Next up, let's talk about the defense. We'll go through a little bit faster with the coordinators here. Jesse Minter also held a presser. I think it was yesterday. And one of the biggest things that he emphasized, which is really cool, by the way, we haven't gotten a lot of time with Coach Minter yet, so being able to kind of pick his brain and see what's going on in terms of the perspective of the media was kind of cool to go back and watch. I would recommend watching all these interviews if you guys would like. It's just my interpretation and breakdown of them. Minter praises the attendance and consistency of participation, which is something similar to what Coach Harbaugh said, right? And again, it really feels like there's a culture and a way of doing things that starts at Jim Harbaugh, and it's traveled very efficiently through his coordinators, his staff, his coaches, and now even his players. The one thing, a big emphasis of the team is to show up, and everybody's there. From what Coach Harbaugh and Minter and everybody's saying, everybody's there. They say, look out the window. There's guys out there in Pat right now. Like it's cool. It's cool. Minter shares a big emphasis on detail. Yep, with Jim Harbaugh, passed down from Jim Harbaugh, as they mentioned. And again, this is something that brings me a lot of optimism in terms of how long is it going to take to build this thing, right? There's a lot that has to happen when you bring in a culture shift of this magnitude, right? You could say that maybe Anthony Lynn and Staley and McCoy and these guys tried to instill a new culture. Nowhere near this level has something like this been attempted in forever. I couldn't even tell you, right? Marty Ball, it's a very special thing. And a big reason I'm optimistic that it's going to happen sooner rather than later is because of the staff that he brought in with him from Michigan. You can't do this very often. Certainly not NFL team to NFL team. You know, those coordinators, those support staff, they get scooped up by other teams, get larger salaries. Everybody goes their separate ways, right? Like going from junior high to high school, like you just have to say sayonara to some of your best buds, even though you expect to be roommates at some point in college. Like, not everyone can stick together. It's different in college. I'm going to college to the NFL, a unique situation. He told everyone, pack their bags. We're going to the Chargers. We're going to build this thing in LA. And Minter, the emphasis to all the different ways that they have built Michigan and they built these previous teams together, it's going to translate. It's going to translate quicker. And Jesse Minter, in the way that he described their emphasis on detail and the things that are passed down from Jim, it tells me that all this stuff's already been fine-tuned. Now it's just relaying it to the troops, the team. Minter also described that he was so ecstatic. One of the big things that he highlighted, he was ecstatic to keep Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack together. Something heralding back to the offseason. A little earlier when we're talking about who's going to be cut, who's going to be traded, what are contracts looking like. He's very excited to see these guys on the team together, man. What a great photo to represent this too, right? You got Mack Bosa. The only guy we're missing is Thule, but we got coaches in there. Fan-freaking-tastic situation that the Chargers defense are putting themselves in by keeping this duo together while also adding some reinforcements in Bud Dupree. And Coach Minter also, just like Jim Harbaugh, as he was pointing out, Derwin James and Justin Herbert, pointed to Khalil and Joey as the examples to emulate to his players, to his defense. These guys, look to these guys for leadership. And what's funny is that Joey and Khalil, these guys, they kind of remind me of those old-timey best friends, right? They're on a boat fishing together every weekend, but they don't say a word to each other. They just get each other, right? It feels like they've got such a tight relationship, and their ability to go out there and lead, even with that kind of personality, is cool. And I've been seeing more of that personality shine through in ways that is easily communicated to their teammates as the weeks have been going on. It's crazy. It really is crazy. There are people out there, and everybody I think does this, and myself included, where if you're around a person or watch a show or or in the same room as a personality for a while, you start to emulate a little bit of what they do that you like, that you admire. And I'm seeing that out of our players. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, great situation. So much so that Coach Minter describes the edge group as yes, an obvious strength that they're building on, but it really does shine a light on what the Chargers are trying to do. Like they went in knowing that the edge position's going to be the shining star on the defense, right? Like this is going to be the big thing that describes them as a unit in 2024. This Chargers team they got edges. They're going to be getting to the quarterback. That's a big part of their game. And it's a big strength that they wanted to lean into in the offseason. And they did so much so that they even brought in Bud Dupree, right? Which he answered that question saying that this dude is in my words, describing his, like a fourth gear to keep the guys fresh and cover their bases in terms of health, right? It's a very important position group that the freshness in terms of that rotation is going to make a difference in terms of quality of play and consistency. So Jesse Minter knew what they were doing. I'm sure he had a hand in it a little bit too, in Bud Dupree and the Edge group forming the way that they did. Now, he also mentioned he wanted to create a system that keeps Derwin close to the ball, right? And this is something we've heard before, right? I think even Brandon Staley said something very similar. We got to get Derwin James more involved. We got to get him where the ball is going to be, because he's just that special of a player. He's the kind of player that you create a defense around. Him and Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and all the edge guys, it's a really good situation to be in if you're Jesse Minter, to have that kind of building blocks to work off of right away. He said so much so that one of his goals in the offseason is to clone Derwin James. And what he means by that is it's like what he was saying and Coach Harbaugh was saying about emulate these guys, become these guys, right? He's also saying that about Derwin James. He wants to find a way to restake his claim as the best safety in the NFL, and Derwin's eating it up, man. Derwin, as a Chargers fan, it sucked last season. To see the light leave the eyes of my players, I'm not going to lie, dude. We all saw it. We all saw it, okay? That last game with the Raiders, I don't know, second quarter, they're panning the camera across the sideline. You see the light leave the eyes of our players as the Raiders continued to stack the score. It sucked. And it's something I saw throughout the whole season under the Staley regime. The light was leaving. I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly why. From the surface and as spectators, we kind of know why. It's kind of a weird, joke of a program they were trying to put together, but the light was leaving. To see that back, to see our team and our players back at this level that reminds us of how good they are. And honestly, I see faces like this, and it reminds me of some of the best plays that Derwin has put up on the field. It reminds me of the body slam Kelsey play, right? The big interception versus the Steelers a few years back. Like, it reminds me of who Derwin James is. And honestly, and again, it sounds cheesy, it's corny, it really is, but that light is back. And I think this environment is bringing that out of him. Restake your claim, Derwin. Jesse's going to help you do that. He's also pushing, and the big reason I chose this photo, Coach Minter also is pushing for big competition at backup safety. We kind of touched on this in the last video because we speculated that was what was happening. Now we got confirmation that Coach Minter says, yeah, that is exactly what's happening. Because he knows there's big opportunities for more snaps on the backup safety than there's going to be on other teams because of how much we move around Derwin. When Derwin goes into the box or into the slot or off the edge or whatever, somebody has to be up there. And he understands that. And they are very much so pushing for the safety competition to be at its peak when it reaches training camp. And that's why they called in Tony Jefferson. Still no word on whether or not Tony Jefferson is going to make the team. I think this is him right here. I know he's wearing 41. Apologies if somebody else is wearing 41 as well. There's still question marks of whether or not he's going to make the team. But Jesse Minter had a lot of good things to say about Tony Jefferson. He called him a pro's pro, like we've heard a million times from Jim Harbaugh. But he says he also knows the defense that we're running, right? He knows the system. He knows the leadership qualities in Tony Jefferson. He understands the kind of playmaker that he can be, and he believes that he still has it. Now he says it's kind of up to Joe Ortiz to make the determination of whether or not to bring in Tony Jefferson. It's a very big possibility, guys. I'm going to say it's like 80% that I think he makes the squad. All right. The last thing that he did mention was his relationship with Junior Colson. Very special, right? Huge, awesome story. If you guys didn't, unearth that during the draft, awesome player in his journey into the NFL, into football in general. And then the relationship that he developed with Jesse Minter, also very special. So he described that as a very big moment for him, which is very cool for Coach Minter. The last thing that I wanted to mention about Minter and the defense. There is a guy that is starting to ascend a little bit. A couple of guys, right? I would say a position, right? He's bringing huge optimism to the cornerback position all of a sudden. Me as a Chargers fan, probably the biggest position, I was like, hey, we got to hit this in the draft. We got to hit this high in the draft. We got to get a guy in here, right? The corners, we need help. Asante needs help. Well, lo and behold, they went out there. They got some guys. They got a couple of them that he points out, and Tariq Still and Cam Hart, two guys that I think have a really good shot at developing into something special. But wow, is Tariq Still starting to blossom. I don't know how many big plays that he had in the last day of minicamp, but he did grab an interception. He made several plays. Coach Minter, very, very impressed with the progression that he's making. And it honestly gives us a really good situation, even if he doesn't make it as like a starter, in terms of like a backup slot. We really need a good backup slot. Guys, Jasir Taylor started in the same, situation. Who was our backup slot back then? Was it Chris Harris Jr.? I think it was Chris Harris Jr. back when we drafted Jasir Taylor. I don't remember. But that position, very important even in the previous Chargers system. It's even more important now in the Jesse Minter system. We have to have a competent slot in there. And Talib, or I should say Jasir Taylor, very good, very good. Talib still, if he's continuing in this trajectory, it's a very similar narrative to what we saw with Jasir Taylor. Late round pick, developed into a solid slot guy. We're kind of starting to see the beginnings of that with Talib still. He also talked high praise of Dean Leonard, his progression, and Cam Hart. So keep that in mind. Talib still could be a nice camp sleeper coming up. Finally, to wrap up this video, maybe going a little bit long, but man, I'm excited, dudes. I'm excited. This is a talk show, okay? Everybody settle down. Put your feet up and talk with your old buddy director about what's going on in training at Chargers camp and Chargers, off season. Greg Roman didn't share a whole lot of details in terms of what they're creating. Of course, you want to keep everything close to the vest as much as possible, but he did give us some nice hints at what the Chargers are trying to create. And we do see it, right? We see it in the clips. We understand what they're trying to build. We know history with Greg Roman. But again, it's all comes down to the system that him and Minter and ultimately Jim Harbaugh are implementing with the team, right? He mentions stages as coats of paint, right? They're getting the first layer down or the primer down, and then they're getting the next layer and the next layer. He feels great about the first few coats, and it's something. It's a way of describing things that I heard from Minter and Jim Harbaugh. That expression of coats of paint, right? Greg is also extremely happy with their integration of Justin Herbert's talents on the new offense. That was probably one of the biggest things I was waiting to hear. Coach Roman, like, what got Justin Herbert? No, you're a run guy. What's the plan here? Like, how are we going to utilize? How are we going to maximize Justin Herbert's, talents on the squad and justify the money and all that kind of stuff? And he says, from how he describes it, that he's very happy with how they're mixing everything in and how Justin Herbert is grasping the offense. Herbert had a lot of really cool things to say about the new offense that we'll put in a different video. And specifically Greg Roman. But it's a really cool dynamic to see these guys working so closely together and understanding exactly, what the new offense is going to be, and that Justin Herbert is a huge, huge part of it. And in terms of their work relationship, Greg Roman's gobsmacked by Justin's ability to learn the offense quickly. And let's be honest, Justin Herbert's been in this situation a lot, right? Like, everywhere he goes, even back in his days in Oregon, like, he's got a new offensive coordinator every other season. It's nuts. And maybe that's given him the ability to quickly adapt and find success in a new system and a new scheme and environment. But him and Greg Roman are getting along very well. But one thing he did mention, in terms of answering our concerns about, being a primary run team, a run first, old school kind of, ground and pound kind of squad, he did say sometimes, and I have this quoted, sometimes the illusion of wanting to run the ball a lot is just as powerful as the ability to run the ball. Isn't that crazy? I like that. I like that. It does feel like chestnut checkers, right? We're going to run, we're going to be successful, but because we can run, you got to respect it. Now here comes Justin Herbert, right? With the illusion or with the respect of a strong run game, Justin Herbert's going to be that much more efficient. So it was good. I'll say it one more time because I kind of butchered it the first time. Sometimes the illusion of wanting to run the ball a lot is just as powerful as the ability to. Cool stuff. Cool stuff. His emphasis on competition was also something interesting. He's less concerned about who's going to be the starter, and more concerned about getting these guys ready to throw into the Thunderdome, right? Thunderdome being training camp. He's more concerned about getting them primed for that Thunderdome opportunity to prove themselves as the starter, the guy that's going to be on the roster. He's fighting for that roster spot. That's what he's preparing for right now, which is kind of a cool thing, right? But he also, something that he hit, the nail on the head with that really made me excited was they're really emphasizing depth on this team, specifically, especially everywhere. But I heard a lot about the offensive line, which is cool. They want everyone ready for every situation, right? They're playing a lot of guys in different positions. They're getting guys ready to step into a situation if it does arise. It's awesome. It's really cool to see. And one of the biggest things I'm hearing over and over and over again, not just from, Greg Roman, but Jim Harbaugh has talked a lot about it, and these other guys, is Trey Pipkins. Pipkins is getting a lot of love, dude. It's another huge praise coming from Greg Roman, that he loves Trey Pipkins. He's stoked for how the line is shaping up and how versatile and adaptive Trey Pipkins has become in his shift to right guard. He's been, again, from every word from every coach that we've heard from so far, he's been fantastic. He's been exceptional, I think is what Jim Harbaugh said. And it's made, just as Jim Harbaugh stoked, it's made, Greg Roman very stoked with how the line is shaping up. It's been a big point. He said they were very versatile, but also, what was the term? He said they were medieval. That he's not afraid to get medieval. These guys aren't afraid to get medieval, which is kind of cool. So these guys very happy with the line. It's going to be a shining strength of this team going into 2024, man. I'm excited to see that come into progression. And of course, as we're seeing him in frame here with Joe Alt, he's very excited about Joe Alt's progression because, of course, there is that transition to right tackle that everyone's a little worried about. Don't be. From everything that we're hearing, everyone's super excited with his progression and his quick adaptation of the right tackle position. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Finally, with Greg Roman. Actually, there's a couple little things here. He hints at a very diverse running system, which is cool, right? Because what did he say? It's in the terms in the light of this. He says creating a creative running attack is just as important as creative passing, right? You want to be unique, you want to be hard to read, and you want to find success behind the strengths of your offensive line. He wants a very diverse system when running the football, which is cool. And that's why I think we got a lot of guys in here that are of different qualities, right? The emphasis is big, physicality, these kind of traits in all of his players, but he praises in specific, Gus Edwards for his physicality, for his strength, for his size, right? And that's a flavor of running back. Then he went on to praise J.K. Dobbins and his vision and his speed. That's a different flavor of running back. I like that. The diversity in the run actually it's kind of easy to tell. Like when you take a step back, oh yeah, cool. I see it. I understand it. If I was running the team on Madden, I'd know what to do with these guys, right? I like it. And again, it's something that, of course, it was kind of tailor-made. They came from the Ravens system. It's kind of a copy and paste sort of thing. But behind this offensive line, behind, this transition, it feels like it's going to work. It really does. It really does. Talks about Jim, these guys being old buddies, and they're excited to tackle this challenge together. It feels like, if it ain't broke, right? If it ain't broke. Last thing I'll say about Coach Roman, he did get giddy when talking about Ladd McConkey, which gets me giddy because you guys know I'm a big Ladd fan. They're very excited. And again, I've heard a lot about Ladd. I'm not going to lie. I heard about Ladd from Greg. I heard about Ladd from Justin Herbert. Everybody's glad we drafted Ladd, right? Be glad we got Ladd. Because he's special. Everyone's describing him as one of the most pro-ready rookies on the team. Coach Roman specifically said that they're going to use him like a Swiss Army knife. He's very polished. Very cool. Very cool to see, especially coming from a guy that we were assuming he's going to be this big run dude. Cool to see him get giddy about Ladd McConkey, the receiver, and what he's going to do for the offense. This is cool. And again, we're going to save a little bit more of that for a different video, but Ladd, he may end up being the dude, man, of the offseason. He may end up being the dude. He also really quickly did touch on the Quentin Johnson situation. And I don't know if I heard enough to be like, hey, yeah, let's go, QJ. We're seeing, a huge change year 2. Let's do it. But more so, what got me motivated and excited was the way that Greg Roman described him and how they're going to get him the ball. It was more appropriate to his strengths at TCU, and it's something that we already started hearing with other coaches. I think Jim. That's awesome. It tells me that we're going to use him the way he needs to be used. He said describes QJ as that dude that needs the ball, get involved underneath a lot, use that speed. Like it feels more appropriate than just that guy on the outside. He did mention they're going to try and hit him deep, use that speed, but that they're going to get him involved in the strengths that we, described when he was being drafted out of TCU a couple years ago. All right. Last couple of things I'll mention. We'll touch on Ben Herbert. Again, these are kind of, word of mouth from some of the other interviews that we'll touch on a little bit more detail later. Players describe him as a savage, right? They note that whatever he's doing is different. They can feel it in their bodies. They think they mentioned their necks. And that Ben is really creating and laying down a foundation of culture in the weight room that is unique, that is different, that is unlike what they've experienced before. This is real. The Ben Herbert effect is real. You got ex-players out there like Navarro Bowman. The dude's out there, man. I saw his mic'd up thing. He's running around with all the players and doing drills. And really, it feels like you understand why they brought in these vets that aren't too separated from their careers, right? Because these guys are in it, man. Him and Nick Hardwick, these guys, they're throwing hands, getting hands on pads and really getting in the line of fire to help train these guys, which is so cool to see. Navarro Bowman's out there doing awesome things with the linebackers. Hardwick's out here I don't know how much his involvement is or how much they've integrated him into the shaping of it, but it feels like he's helping shape a great offensive line. It's really coming together, dudes. Really coming together. The remainder of the staff has been absolutely awesome. Marcus Brady, who I got to ask a question to at one of the Chargers pressers, he's been fan. Everybody just feels like they're locked in to the Jim Harbaugh way. Working. It's unfolding. It's becoming a reality in front of our very eyes. And this new culture shift, this new way of doing things, it's something that is not just so important for this season, but for the future of this team. Let's say Jim Harbaugh coaches 6-7 years, right? This is the kind of thing that lives on past that era, and it's obvious everywhere he's been. And I'm so excited to see, and so blessed and so emotional to see my team finally catching a break and seeing this kind of change, this necessary and obvious change to become Super Bowl caliber players and Super Bowl caliber organization too. It's fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you liked what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up, stay frosty, and stay tuned, man. We got a lot more content we got to cover from this last week. There's a overload of interviews and stuff that we got to touch on. Much love, Bull fam.